You ever wonder what really separates the wealthy from, well, everyone else? It's not what you think. It isn't just luck or being smarter or even working harder. The real difference? It's all in how they think. So today, we're going to break down the exact mental models that can completely flip the rules of money in your favor. Let's dive in.
Okay, so get this. The core idea is that your own brain might be what's keeping you stuck. And no, it's not because you're lazy or not talented. It's because you're thinking like everyone else. And let's be honest, everyone else usually isn't crushing it financially. If you want different results, you've got to start with a different way of thinking. Simple as that. So, how do you actually do that? Well, we're going to get into the 6 key mental principles that the top 1% use to get their edge. And look, this isn't some complex high-level theory. These are practical, real-world shifts in how you see things. Shifts you can start using literally today to kind of install a new mental operating system for building wealth.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about what this different mindset really is. Then, we'll cover the principles for seeing the bigger picture. After that, we're going to zoom in on how to upgrade your decision-making. Then we'll cover how you protect your most important assets. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a simple action plan for you to take away. Okay, let's get one thing straight right away. This is not about working harder or grinding yourself into the ground. Not at all. It's about installing a totally new mental operating system, one that helps you build sustainable long-term wealth by design, not just by pure luck or accident.
All right, let's jump into the first 2 principles. Now, these are all about zooming out. Learning to step back from all the daily noise and chaos so you can focus on what actually builds real momentum over the long haul. Okay, principle number 1 is a question. It's so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Next time you're faced with stress or a major setback or just, drama, maybe a big deal falls through or a key person on your team quits, I want you to just stop. Pause for a second and ask yourself this one question. Will this even matter in 5 years? I promise you, 99% of the time, the answer is going to be a clear no. And what this does is just brilliantly highlight the difference between what feels urgent and what is actually important. See, most people get caught in the trap of constantly reacting to urgent emotional fires all day long. This question, it forces you to step back and separate those feelings from what's truly important. The stuff that compounds over time and actually builds your long-term vision. The trick is to handle the urgent stuff with the least amount of energy possible so you can save all your focus for what really matters.
All right, now for principle number 2. This one kind of flies in the face of all that just work harder advice we always hear. Instead of just grinding it out, the wealthy focus on recognizing patterns. Think about it. If you find yourself solving the exact same problem over and over, like more than once, that's not a coincidence. That's a signal that you have a broken system that needs a real, permanent fix.
So the big shift here, the really crucial part, is going from being the hero who's always putting out fires to being the architect who designs a building that's fireproof in the first place. You identify that repeating problem, you build a system to solve it for good, you write down how it works, and then you can scale it forever. And that, right there, is the difference between just being busy and actually getting rich. Okay, let's move on to our next section, because this is where it all starts to build on itself. We just talked about zooming out. Now it's time to zoom back in with principles 3 and 4. These are all about the tactics, how to make smarter, more strategic choices right in the moment.
So principle number 3 is something called one level up thinking. It's pretty simple. When you're staring down a problem, don't just react from where you are right now. Instead, try to mentally step outside of your own role. Ask yourself, okay, how would my boss see this, or the CEO, or even the board of directors? What this does is it forces you to think structurally, not just emotionally. There's this great example of a business owner who had this massive fulfillment problem, a total nightmare, and her business partner, instead of just fixing it for her, he refused. He forced her to think one level up. He made her shift from being just an operator, in the weeds, to being the architect of the whole solution. It was super tough for her, but that shift was the absolute key to her growth. And that actually leads us perfectly into principle 4. Now this might be the toughest one of all, but it is also one of the most powerful. And it's this: you have to make decisions without emotion. There's a story about a high-level executive who had to be let go. And the decision wasn't personal, it wasn't emotional, it was just math. The performance data, the numbers, they told the entire story.
Yeah, and this table really just nails the split, right? On one side, you have your emotions screaming, oh, I feel so bad for them, or oh, this is so awkward. But then you look at the other column, the data column, and it's just objective fact.
Performance metrics have declined 30%. This role is not driving results. The top performers, they learn to live in that data column when making big calls, and it leads to way clearer, way faster decisions that, you guessed it, compound your wealth.
All right, we're on to our final 2 principles. And these are really about building the personal foundation that makes everything else we've talked about even possible. This is all about protecting the 2 core assets that fuel all your growth: your time and your environment.
Okay, so principle 5. Here's the deal. Most people trade their time for money. The elite, they treat their time as capital. It's an asset, something that can either be invested and compounded or just totally wasted. And you have to remember, it is the one resource you can never, ever, ever get back. That means you have to protect it like your life depends on it. Because, well, it kind of does. So what's the move here? I want you to literally audit your calendar like it's a P&L statement. For every single meeting, every task on there, ask yourself, what is the ROI on this hour? Then you got to be ruthless. Cut the low-yield stuff. Outsource or automate anything that's just creating friction. And then, this is the magic part, you reinvest all those hours you just got back into high-return thinking, stuff like strategy, planning, and building key relationships.
And that brings us to our final principle. And honestly, this might be the most important one of them all. You have to curate your environment. Your environment is, well, it's everything. It's the people you hang out with, the places you go, even the problems you choose to work on. Think of it like this. It is the operating system for your mind.
Because here's a hard truth. Your thinking will never outpace the environment you put it in. It just can't. There's this incredible story about a guy who became 5 times happier, literally overnight, just by cutting one single negative person out of his life. That's the kind of impact we're talking about. The wealthiest people, they get this on a deep level. They are absolutely ruthless about curating who gets their time, choosing only people who are going to stretch their standards and really challenge their thinking. Okay, so there you have it. 6 really powerful mental shifts. So now let's pull it all together into one simple, actionable framework that you can start using to think differently, like right now. All right, here is your 6-point mindset upgrade. Number 1, use that 5-year question to filter out all the noise. Number 2, look for patterns. Don't just work harder. Number 3, use 1 level up thinking to make better decisions. 4, separate emotion from the cold, hard data. 5, treat your time as capital. And number 6, curate your environment relentlessly. These 6 things, this is your new foundation.
If you really act on these principles, I guarantee you will start to think in a fundamentally different way from 99% of the people out there. That is how real, sustainable wealth is built. So I'll leave you with one final question. Knowing that your thinking will never, ever outpace your environment, what's the one change you're going to make to curate yours starting today?